Kia ora and welcome. I'm Patrick McKibbin. I'm the CEO of the Hutt Valley Chamber of Commerce, and I'm really delighted this afternoon to welcome Seth Singh, who's a senior client advisor from Kendons Chartered Accountants, and we're going to talk about the recent announcements regarding the financial support for businesses as a result of the COVID-19 situation. Kendons Chartered Accountants are located here in the Lower Hutt, and they have a dedicated team of professional accountants who provide tax and accounting services, as well as business advisory services. If you have any questions after you've watched this video, please reach out to us either by commenting on the post or by reaching out to the Chamber of Commerce directly to me or one of the team here. Thank you for watching, and I hope you will find this useful. So, Seth, thanks very much for taking the time today to explain a little bit more about the detail of the financial support that was announced by the government last week. There has been a bit of confusion, especially around the eligibility of the COVID support payment. So it's great you are able to join us and help us to understand the detail in a little bit clearer. So we're going to start off with a question about those new measures. So last week, the government did announce a few new measures that have been put in place to assist businesses. But we'll start first with the COVID support payments, as this is the one that seems to have created the most confusion. I understand there have been further changes made on Friday for the comparison periods as well. Can you talk about this help and how you understand it, please?
Oh, thank you, Patrick, for that introduction. And I suppose the COVID support payment essentially is a boost up in terms of cash flow for viable and ongoing businesses. It's I suppose the test and eligibility is similar to what we've seen previously, where it's revenue based. The base payment here is we're looking at $4,000, and then it's an additional amount per full-time equivalent employee. So it's capped at $24,000, and that's base payment of $4,000 plus $400 per full-time equivalent employee. In terms of the criteria, I suppose the one that, like you said, is most confusing is the revenue drop. So essentially how it works is you take a 7-day period from after the COVID phase shifts. So that's from 16th of Feb onwards. So you take 7 days from there and you compare it to a 7-day period between the 5th of January through to the 15th of January. And the changes that we've seen come through, previously it was set out to be the 5th of January 22 to the 15th of January 22. The change now they've implemented is you can use the prior year. So you can take 7 days from 16th of Feb 22 onward and compare that to a 7-day period going back to 5th of January 21 through to 15th of Feb 22. Oh, right. Sorry, 15th of Feb 21.
Okay, good. So that will be welcome news to a lot of businesses, I think, that change.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, what I think the confusion was, and I suppose the concern with businesses was they would have already been impacted by COVID during or Omicron outbreak prior to these date changes. And so if you're going back another year, it's probably a bit more available and open to other businesses.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. So there's also been some changes made to the small business cash flow scheme. Can you explain those and how these might assist the business, please?
Okay, so recently the announcement change was basically to the base amount. So previously it was a $10,000 base loan plus $1,800 per full-time equivalent employee. And it was capped at 50 employees, so the maximum that was available was 100,000. Now that maximum is 110,000, with it being increased from $10,000 to $20,000. And so there's an additional $10,000 available for small to medium-sized enterprises. The other thing that they've introduced is I suppose a cover-all in terms of accrued interest. So the interest on the loan would have been accruing for the first 2 years, even though you may not have paid it. That's now written off, and so that's, I suppose, that they've done a blanket all for all loans. If you've already taken out a loan and repaid it, you can do a second application. And I suppose in terms of both of these schemes, they're available through My IR. The COVID support schemes come through today, and it's open today, whereas the top up for the small business cash flow loan, they've indicated will be in place by end of March. Also, in terms of the COVID support payment, with the changes in the comparison period, that hasn't yet been implemented on My IR. So currently they've only got a comparative period of 22. So that's coming up, and it will be implemented soon, is what we understand.
Brilliant. Okay. So that again, that will be great news for businesses that I've talked to that we're a bit worried about the comparison period. So thanks for clearing that up, and it'll be great news when IR get that change noted on their system as well. That will clear up lots of confusion. The moving on then to the announcements last week included a reminder that there are options via IR to request flexibility of tax payments. So can you talk about how those might assist businesses, or what your recommendation is regarding those sorts of that flexibility?
So I suppose we see this quite a bit with our clients, and just in terms of smoothing out cash flow. So you'll see that, I suppose, we've got terminal taxes coming up in April, and then there'll be some provisional taxes coming up in May. And those tend to be quite large chunks. So with the provisional taxes, it tends to be a third of the expected income of the expected tax, and your provisional taxes is a wash-up, which can also be, if it hasn't been monitored throughout the year closely, you might be looking at a very large payment. And so by requesting an instalment arrangement, you can smooth out that cash flow. Instead of having to pay that lump sum, you might be paying smaller amounts, more aligned to what you're coming in terms of revenue per week. And I suppose the other benefit there is, if the instalments in place, IRD will remit penalties as long as the arrangement's kept to. You can request interest remittance. Normally this is done after the core tax is paid. And again, if it's COVID related, do note that in the request, it should help you, which should help your application with inland revenue. And I suppose the other thing that we see with these type of schemes are, there is a pitfall. So if you continually are getting an arrangement, it can snowball where you're not keeping up, or you're having to renew the arrangement each time a tax comes due. So ideally, you want to smooth out the big lump sum payments like your provisional taxes, but keep up to date with the regular payments like your PAYE and your GSTs.
Cool, great advice. And I guess in any of those situations, talk to your accountant and get some advice, and also talk to Inland Revenue. I'm sure they're happy to help.
Most definitely. Yeah.
So if a business is ineligible or not eligible for the support payment, can you remind our watchers what sort of payments, or financial support might be available to them? And do you expect the things like the short-term absence payment to change now that we've got things like RAT tests in place, which will mean that people can tell whether they've got COVID almost immediately rather than having to wait for a test? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I suppose there is support available outside of the small business cash flow loan, and also the COVID support system. And that's this is done through WINS, whereas the small business cash flow loan and the COVID support payment is done via my IR. So the support available through WINS is for employers and employers who have staff that I suppose have been affected by COVID-19 and have had to either take a test, which is for the short-term absent payment, or they've had staff that have had COVID-19 or have a dependent that's had COVID-19 and have been forced to basically take 4 or more consecutive days off. In that case, you can apply for the short absence leave payment, and essentially it's a $600 payment for a full-time employee versus a $359 payment for a part-time worker. The distinguishing factor is the number of hours. So if you're over 20 hours, you're classified as a full-time employee. Under, then you're classed as a part-time worker.
Right.
And again, the applications are done by the employer through WINS, and it's they've got on their website, if you go to the front page, there's a COVID-19 support tab, and through there you can either select the short-term absent payment or the support leave payment. In terms of the short-term payment, it can be applied for again if you're having to isolate for 11 days or more. So that way you're applying for on a weekly basis. So 4 days is 1 week, and then once you hit 11 days, you can do a second application. Whereas with the short-term absent payment, because that's based around on you having to get a COVID test and waiting basically before you were waiting 24 hours, it was a one-off basically per employee payment.
Yeah.
And so they, like you said, they might change that. It still hasn't no, I suppose, definitive legislation or confirmations come out. So we may see changes in that, because now instead of having to wait 24 hours, you're only having to wait an hour or so for the RAT tests, I suppose.
Yeah. Fantastic. Any other advice, Seth, that you would give to businesses to kind of looking at those payments and thinking about payments?
I would definitely start with saying, if having a look at your options, if you are eligible and you meet the criteria, do make the application. I mean, obviously it's for struggling businesses, and the government's doing what they can in terms of putting the support out there. And if you guys, if a business is struggling, it's got to review whether it's available for the support, and if it's eligible, definitely go ahead and apply. Even if you can't get the support, get in contact with Inland Revenue if you're having tax issues in terms of meeting up or maintaining your payments. We're seeing a lot of leniency and understanding from them and setting those up. So do get in contact if the business is struggling cash flow wise.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you, Seth. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge and advice with all of us. And thank you to our listeners for taking the time to watch this webinar. The Chamber of Commerce is here to help, and we do have have at our disposal a whole range of different experts that we can tap into for questions. People like the Kendons Chartered Accountants, for example. So. Thank you very much. We will continue to bring you a number of these videos as things develop. And if you do have any questions, please reach out. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Have a good day.